Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Chai with Startup CEOs. Today, I'm joined by a really good friend of mine, Spandana, who is the CEO and founder of ZoEasy, a blue collar oriented sort of platform towards recruiting and essentially, upskilling people so that they can become and sort of transfer themselves into professional fields of work. Spandana, it's such a pleasure to have you on. I've had the privilege of meeting you once, and it's really nice that we could sort of get on this call.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was gonna start like listing your accolades and things like that. So, Spandana is a Forbes 30 under 30 awardee. She is a One Young World ambassador and delegate speaker. She is, the World Economic Forum global shaper, vice curator of the UAE Middle East hub, and so it's like crazy. I can just go on for days, and that's the problem with great entrepreneurs, I guess. And listing out what you think sort of matters to them, but really, I'm sure that Spandana doesn't lose any sleep over sort of getting awards or anything like that. So, Spandana, tell us a little bit about sort of ZoEasy, and obviously I explained it from a very from my perspective. Tell us a bit about how it started out, and what people should know about it.
Sure, absolutely. So basically, just a quick gist, ZoEasy is a platform that looks at educating and matching job seekers within the migrant blue-collar workforce to more ethical opportunities, more ethical employment opportunities, but in a more transparent manner. Where this came about, actually, I've lived in the UAE for almost 19 years now, so I've practically grown up here. And one of the best things about living in the UAE is the fact that it's so diverse. So you get to meet people from various nationalities, different walks of life. And a big part of that is the blue collar community. There's almost 4 million blue collar workers in the UAE, and that's almost 43% of the population. So it's a massive number. And
Wow. Yeah.
You tend to interact with this community on a regular basis, and that's kind of where I started to, listen to a lot of stories within this community. And one of the people that I met, she was actually my age, and she came out here in the hopes of, taking up employment as a salesperson. But unfortunately, what happened was, there was this middleman in her home country, like an agent or broker, as they would call them. And he, told her, you'll get this amazing job. I'll make sure that you're gonna get into sales, and then you'll grow from there. And he sold her like a very rosy picture, something that was very far from the actual job that he had for her. And so she ended up selling all her assets to be able to come out here and to be able to support her family back home. And she almost ended up shelling out about $2,500 to $3,000 for this job. And when she came here, she realized it was actually a cleaning job, but the agent was not transparent with her. And so in the process, she actually had to spend almost her entire 2-year contract period, which is the typical contract period for full-time employment here. So she spent about 1.5 years just repaying her debt. And I thought that was really unfortunate, because here's someone that's my age, and I'm like in a completely different, I'm in this completely different position. I have access to all these opportunities. I know how to kind of go about this because of the background that I come from. And there's this person who's my age who needs to support her family, and she had to go through this just because she didn't have the right guidance or the right person to take her through this process. And unfortunately, for employers as well, they don't have access to any other way of hiring in this community. I mean, there are certain things that are now available, but it's mostly done through middlemen and like offline agents. And so that's that was like the starting point, I guess. And I started to speak to more people within this community, and I realized that it was quite an ongoing problem. And so that's where I decided to start working on this idea. And it's been an exciting journey so far. So
Yeah. How many years is that?
I started towards the end of 2016. So I graduated from university, and while I was applying for jobs, because I didn't go with the graduate programs. I was just like, nah, we'll figure this out as we go along. It's okay. So I came back and started applying for jobs. But in the meantime, so this was the person I started interacting with quite regularly, and so I started working on this idea. And my dad is an entrepreneur, so he was like, okay, why don't you lay out a budget and see whether it's something that's feasible? And I was kind of balancing the two, and it reached a point where I had received a job offer from a Big Four. But surprisingly, on the same day, I also got like an interest in it for investment. So it wasn't a confirmation, it was an interest for investment. And so that was kind of like the crossroads and when I decided.
And what category of person is that interest of investment coming from? Like a VC or like an angel, or what was it?
He was an angel investor, and he was quite active in the startup space. And he thought that this could be something interesting, something different to explore. So he said, if you just work on the idea a little more, and if it reaches a certain stage, then it is something that I could potentially invest in. And though it wasn't like an actual confirmation, that was like one encouraging point, which it kind of gives you the drive to kind of take it ahead. So.
Oh, trust me, I know. I feel like I'm where you were at that point right now, and it's a very, very scary place to be, right? Because you think that it's easy enough to sort of pick entrepreneurship as a path, and then you'll be riding a Rolls Royce like the next day, that's sort of the image that's portrayed. But I think right now my biggest concerns are like, oh shoot, I'm not working a full-time job. How am I supposed to pay my rent for when I'm back in London and things like that? I'm just because obviously I don't want to rely on my folks, because obviously we're in a super privileged position that we both are in that we can sort of rely on our folks, like if everything sort of falls apart and things like that. And I think a lot of people don't have that kind of safety net. But then it's still I don't want to burden them anymore. They've done enough. They've paid for university and international tuition fees, which is insane on its own. So that's sort of where I'm right now. So I can't imagine sort of the stress that you felt at that moment, sort of having to decide this thing that won't necessarily sort of give you immediate returns. And I think that's the biggest thing about entrepreneurs that I sort of admire the most, because it's not a short kind of a short haul. It's a very long haul kind of project. So so tell you mentioned the sort of 4 million people statistic on the blue collar piece. Could you tell us a little bit more about whether you think that the first mover advantage, because I guess ZoEasy is sort of a first mover in the category in Dubai, in the UAE. Do you sort of actually feel that was an advantage, or was that a disadvantage? Because I've seen it go both ways.
So I wouldn't say so. It is a first mover in one sense, I would say, but there are a lot of services out there that do kind of provide this. It's just that we provide it a little differently. That's the only thing. And what's happened is, the way this hiring is done, it's been set in stone for so long. It's the same recruitment process that's been happening for almost 40 years or so. And because it's been there for so long, people find it difficult to adapt and change to something new. Or it's the fact that sometimes what we say seems a little too good to be true. This is especially in the case of job seekers, because when we tell job seekers that, we don't actually want to charge anything from the candidate, we'll help you find it. Many people find that a little strange, and they don't trust you that easily, because it's we've had to pay so much before. Why don't we have to? Why are you not charging us anything? And so that's kind of where the challenge comes in, because it's just the fact that they're not used to something like this being provided. And additionally, there are for example, there are some companies that do use a lot of these offline recruitment agencies, right? And it's reached a point where when employers pay for the service, the middlemen still charge from the job seekers. So employers are we are paying you. Why are you charging from them? But because they aren't able to kind of break that cycle, it's reached a point where they're like, okay, what's the point in even paying these people if they're not going to stop charging these?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's
No, of
also
course.
that aspect of it. But I think, it really depends on who you're meeting with and dealing with, and there are companies that are willing to pay for something like this, and it is a new idea, and it is it's difficult to implement, don't get me wrong. Like the way it's structured, the way the industry is structured, it is quite difficult to implement, but if you work with the right stakeholders and the right people, I think you'll be able to move ahead. And I've learned that over the past 4 years. You have to kind of like do your homework and figure out who are the right people to work with and how to take it ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, who you sort of work with, and that piece is what sort of gives me the greatest piece of like admiration for you, I think, because it's so incredibly difficult, and I this cannot be sort of like stated further. I think that being a social enterprise in the Middle East is not an easy category. Like, oh my God, like, if you're out in the European ecosystem and you say that, you sort of you have some of your eggs in the CSR basket and things like that. Sure, I get it. Like, fair enough. It's easier access to funding. There's like several funding competitions out there that you can get access to capital to. But to do it here is so incredibly hard. And I cannot stress like how much sort of respect I have for you on that end. So like, on, I guess, reaching out to the CSR, departments of like, potentially large clients, you mentioned in one of your previous interviews that you'd spoken to the CSR of Jotun, and I think they were a client or something like that. Tell me how that came about, and like what's sort of like the best cold outreach practice that you've adopted over the years?
So honestly, the best thing to do is to kind of figure out who the main companies are out there that hire quite extensively. So they hire on a regular basis. They've dedicated a certain number of people per year. And more importantly, what are the kind of hiring systems they have in place? So you have a lot of people hiring in the market. Okay, there's plenty of companies out there. And if you want to grow your database quickly, it's I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's fairly simple to be able to bring those names on board. You'll be able to bring 2,000, 3,000 companies on board quite easily. But for me, I feel like, quality is what matters. And you need to figure out who the right companies are to work with, because, we work with a certain ethos, right? So one, we don't want to charge anything from the job seeker. So we have to work with companies that are willing to pay us for that kind of service. Two, even if they're willing to pay us for that kind of service, what are the different parameters they have in place to be able to look after the job seekers once they've come on board? So, are you paying a fair salary? Do you pay your job seekers on time? What about access to accommodation, transportation? Are these covered? Are they not covered? What about overtime? There are so many different parameters that you have to look at. And when it comes to certain employers, you know that for a fact that they are like that based on the communication that you have with them. So for the example you mentioned, I could tell from the very beginning, because the job descriptions are super clear. They have very clear systems in place. You know that the accommodation is good, and it's well taken care of. And every person that we've placed so far with them has been happy. So you can tell that it's a good choice that we've made, and that they've made.
Right, and it's like sort of like this. They also need to have the infrastructure in place to sort of support your service, essentially.
I mean, you have to be open. I'm not saying that you have to be super rigid, but it's good to have employers like that on board. People who will take care of their job seekers, and they're very big on diversity and inclusion. They want to include women in their workforce as well. Manufacturing is such a traditionally man's job in this part of the world, so they want to get women involved in the workforce. They want to uplift people, and that's something that I really admire about them. And so that's one of the main reasons why I really wanted to work with them. And so far it's been going really great. So
right, and sort of like on for any other social enterprise sort of founders or potentially people that want to get into the space, who would you recommend that they sort of best focus their efforts on reaching out to within those companies, I guess? Because it varies, I'm sure, within each company and depending on sort of like networks and connections.
Well,
Who is that sort of for you?
depends on the social enterprise and the kind of work that you're trying to do, right? So like for us, we don't necessarily have to reach out to the CSR department. It's about reaching out to the right person within the company, be it within HR or be it within CSR. Doesn't matter. As long as, you know, there is another proactive person at the other end who wants to make sure that, you know, they're getting their stuff done and we're getting our stuff done. So I would really say it depends on what that social enterprise is doing. If it's more, say, for example, it's more focused around volunteering and training, then you need to be able to reach out to the CSR departments because they have the budgets to be able to kind of assign their people or assign these budgets to these specific activities that you can host. And in that case, you can reach out to everyone, right? Like it's not a very specific section of the market that you're looking at. You can reach out to the big fours, you can reach out to major consulting companies, various Fortune 500 organizations that will support the sector. So
awesome. Yeah, that's really good advice, I think. And the very casual segue into consulting as well. So I would say you've said before in 2017 it was a year of a lot of no's, and you also had a consulting offer at the time. I guess what made you decide that the entrepreneurial path was the best one for you, and do you wish that you'd learned something from consulting now, looking back like 4 years? Would you have done something differently?
Sure. So let me start with what I would have learned from consulting first. So this is something that I realized, especially over the last 2 years after being a global shaper, actually, because the shapers within Dubai Hub, for example, there were quite a few shapers that were from the consulting field. And one of the shapers that I worked with on an education project, I was amazed by like how well organized he was with all his tools, the different things that you can use to manage a project. And this was stuff that I was never aware of, frankly. Like I don't know about half of these tools simply because I haven't worked in that field. So I would say the one thing that I would love to pick up on is probably being a little more well organized and implementing projects in a more systematic manner. But otherwise, I would say no regrets, to be honest, because I feel like you need to be the kind of, especially like as an entrepreneur, it's not about the amount of planning that you do, it's about the execution as well. So I think that's really important. So you plan, but don't just keep planning, you know? You have to make sure that you get out there and try it. You may fail at it. It's fine. You know, that's okay. But at least you'll learn from that and then you'll know what to change next time. And I think that's
absolutely
important. In terms of why I decided to keep going, even though I got a lot of no's, well, I got one really big yes in 2018. So, that I think is what changed the ball game. Like I think it was One Young World. Like I did get one. So it was Forbes at the end of 2017, and then in 2018 it was followed by One Young World, and that opened up a lot of opportunities and a lot of people and collaborations. So yeah.
No, that's crazy. I think One Young World, like, you know, especially is such a great organization. We could probably, 100%. The both of us especially, could possibly rave about them for quite a while. But to any young entrepreneurs or change makers listening, like definitely check One Young World out. I think there's such a great organization, and it's not just like a branding stint. It's actually people that are making a difference, and I think that's what makes them so special. So I guess the next question I had was more so around the fact that, like, you know, you as a founder, you know, when I was texting you today, you're like, I'm back to back except for this time, like, you know, and that's so true and, like, you know, prominent in the lives of so many entrepreneurs, right? So how do you feel about, you know, being a solo sort of founder, I guess, because a lot of people have the notion that you do need a co-founder to succeed. Do you feel like that would have helped, or like what was your thinking around being a solo founder?
So honestly, I just kind of went into it. I didn't really think about, should I have a founder? Should I not have like a co-founder? Should I not have a co-founder? It wasn't something that I really thought about that much, to be honest. Over the years, I did. So it is beneficial to have a co-founder in some senses. In the sense, you have a diverse skill set, I feel. So, you as a solo founder, or like the only person, you have certain strengths. You also need people to be able to complement your weaker areas, right? So I feel like that is where the biggest benefit comes in, because you've got a wide pool of skills to kind of work with, and it's always nice to have like a team where you have like a support system in a way. And also it looks more attractive to investors, I'll be honest. Like, investors do like to see co-founders, mainly because, if something happens to one founder, you know that there's two more founders to be able to kind of like come in and support.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's been much of a problem for me over the years, at least. I've just had team members who would complement my skills in certain areas, and I rely on them for that kind of expertise. But it is something that I am definitely thinking of down the line. So, it may be 4 to 5 years in, but I think now would be a good time for me to explore that option.
Yeah. Awesome. You heard it here first, guys. Spandana is looking for a co-founder. Send her your application at spandana@zoeasy.co.
Yes. I look forward to it.
If you do actually get any applications, can I please get like a referral fee or something like that? That'd be great. But like you mentioned, sort of relying on your team, right, for to sort of like sustainably run ZoEasy. Have you hired anyone older than you?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell me what that experience is.
The funniest thing is, I think I've had only two team members that were younger than me, and they were both interns at one point. So,
wow.
Yeah, most of the people that I've worked with have been older than me. Some were only a couple of years older than me, so we're still in like the same kind of age range. Yeah. But some who have been significantly older than I am. But what I could say is that it's actually a great experience because you get to learn a lot from them as well. And they also get a slightly different perspective, especially people that have worked in like, massive organizations and the corporate world for so long. For them to be able to engage in something like this, it's a lot more tangible. So I think that's kind of where they come in. And most of them tend to come in more from like a mentorship perspective as well. They want to mentor and make sure that you drive it forward properly. And I think that's really important to have. So have older mentors or people that are more skilled than you in certain areas to be able to kind of guide you down the right path.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I guess, what about when you were hiring them? Were they like, oh, you're like 20 something, should I work for you? I don't know. So how did you get them on board? And like, I guess what was that hiring process like?
Okay. Well, honestly, I haven't really experienced that much. And then most people were really nice about it. And like with some people, I did say like, it's going to be really different to working in an organization or like a massive corporate because, these were people that used to head divisions and things like that. So they have a massive support system, like they have to delegate and things will get done. Whereas within a startup, you kind of have to take your own responsibility. You have to be accountable for your actions as well, right? So I did mention that, there is this massive work style difference. So just like an FYI, because sometimes that could prove to be a little difficult to adapt to, but those who there were some people who upright said, it might not be the best fit, but then there were some people who took a genuine interest and they did really want to kind of go along the journey and see what that would be like, and I was really appreciative of that. Whatever guidance and whatever support they gave me at that point in time, I feel was very valuable, and it was a good dynamic. I think I've never really experienced anything anything bad with
Yeah.
anything. It was a great dynamic.
Yeah, so if there was ever any sort of suspicion that, there could be some sort of like a confrontational nature between all these Gen Z entrepreneurs, whatever, are like, becoming CEOs and they're just going to kick all of us out of the workforce, something like that, absolutely not. Like we need like, help from the older generations essentially
100%.
and sort of like the guidance like that they've, from, their experience in industry, I think it's absolutely invaluable, right? Absolutely. And if you think about, you've also said that, you want to reach 1 million job seekers, right? That's a huge, huge amount. And that is something that you want to achieve in the next 5 years, I believe. Um, like, what do you think are the pillars sort of the scalability of ZoEasy that is going to get you there, essentially?
So I think it should be, I'll just keep it like super simple. Honestly, it needs
Yeah.
to be a combination of good technology with the right partnerships. And of course, the right practices to implement with a good team, right? I think those are like
Right.
three key things that you need in place. If you have those, then you're good to go. I think.
Right. No, absolutely. And I guess when you're in the social enterprise category and you're in the MENA region, what do you recommend is sort of, the go-to sort of funding avenues that you would approach? Because, okay, how about you sort of tell me about the differences between like a typical tech business and sort of when you label yourself as like a social enterprise, does it vary significantly, or do you go into a meeting where like this is our MRR, this is like, our projected, growth for the next few years, or like what do you say? This is our SOM and TAM and whatever. So like, what's the pitch like?
You change your pitch according to who you're talking to. That's the
Yeah.
whole ball game, right? So if you go to a VC, you have to show your projections. At the end of it, that's what matters. So you have to show your projections, you
Yeah.
have to show your profitability, but you also mentioned the fact that you are also creating an impact. So it's not just revenue and dividends that you're going to be earning. You're also going to be earning a lot of karma points. So I think
Yeah. Yeah.
that is really important. I think it's just about how you tailor your pitch to different people.
Yeah.
About
Mhm.
4-5 years ago when I started, it was a different landscape. There wasn't really that much information on social enterprises. You were either a company that was for profit or you were a company that was an NGO. You're a charity-based organization. There was no in between.
Yeah.
So definitely then I feel like it was a lot more challenging. But now it has changed, especially over here as well. It has changed. Investors are aware of this new, I say new, but this new paradigm essentially. And there are
Mhm.
companies that are willing to support, be it women within this space or just entrepreneurs in general within this space. So
Yeah.
I would say, Expo 2020 is like one of the biggest ones for me.
I mean, are you presenting in like 100 days or something like that? Because I know it's around the corner. Are you going to be?
So
Yeah.
they've got like different weeks and different themed weeks happening. So we're going to be a part of
So
that
cool.
programming, and it's exciting. We're excited to be a part of it.
So where's my invite? Like I didn't get anything in my mail, so I'm kind of looking
We're
forward to
still
that.
looking for our official invite as well. I mean, it's still underway, so we've got to figure out they've got like some of the operational stuff to take care of. But yeah, once that's done, 100%. Would love for you guys, for any of you all to just come out and check us out over.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be super cool. I mean, this event, just for context, everyone, is like the sort of most look forward to event of the year, or the last 2 years, actually, for that matter. And now it's all finally like sort of coming to fruition. So it's really, really cool. And just before I skip on to the next question I have for you, Spandana, guys, don't forget to subscribe, smash the that like button. I keep forgetting to do that, so I gotta do it. So, and I feel like the piece where you talk about how social enterprise investment is different or the same as VC, your typical tech to VC investment is probably the place where everyone's going like, yeah, that's the piece I want to hear. Like, what's going to be different about that.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
so yeah, and tell me a little bit about like the sort of key enablers and ecosystem drivers here, because I know you're part of Hub 71, is it? Or was it
Area 27.
the Area 2071? Yeah, yeah. So tell me about like that piece of the ecosystem out here.
100%. So, Area 2071 is actually a Dubai government initiative that was set up in line with His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, so the PM of the UAE. And
Yeah.
it's basically to achieve the 100-year vision that he has of, seeing Dubai and the UAE becoming like the leaders of innovation down the line. And basically, Area 2071 is the space for not just startups, but they're looking for individuals that are in the creative space, freelancers, people that can, add to innovation and creativity within the region. They're looking for people like that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be people that are based within the UAE. You can come from any part of the world. If you kind of fit into their key pillars and key thoughts, then that's the kind of talent that they're looking for. And the interesting thing about the space is that it's kind of like divided into three parts, and you have accelerators sitting in one area of the space, and then you've got like independent entrepreneurs like me, and we're sitting there. And then you've got a third space for Dubai Future Accelerators and the DFF staff. So, everybody's just kind of like interlinked, and you get to meet new people and from different backgrounds, different social enterprises, to crypto startups, to fintech startups. You have everybody that's sitting over here. And there were a lot of interesting programs. Like before Techstars went to Hub 71, they were part of this area. And you got to meet a lot of interesting people within the ecosystem through that as well, and through the current like Microsoft AI Venture Labs as well. So it's a really cool space to kind of hang out and just get your creative juices going. And it's also a great place to make a lot of connections, because many of the delegations pass through that area. Like a lot of like governments and delegations pass through that area. And in fact, I established my first government partnership through that space. So it's a really cool place to be at, for sure.
Yeah, exciting. I've got to check it out. I got like a couple more weeks, so got to somehow get into Area 2071, like a top secret UFO site. I feel like that's the vibe. But then it's really so cool to see that all of this is happening out here. I feel like it's such a, I feel like the mainstream population still don't know too much about like what's going on within these startup hubs, when actually the wheels are definitely moving on Dubai becoming a big startup hub, or like a sector cluster at least. So it'd be very interesting to see where the startup ecosystem out here goes. And finally, I guess, like, do you have any exciting developments about ZoEasy that are not yet anywhere else that we will hear first out here on Chai with Startup CEO?
Well, I can't exactly disclose those if they're top secret, are there? But no, we've got a couple of interesting things going. So I think I'll keep you posted. Let's put it that way, because I can't disclose a lot of it. We've made a lot of progress on our tech. I'll just put that out there. We made some really good progress on some of the new tech that we're developing. So we're excited to start putting that out, seeing how that goes.
Yeah, very exciting. So
That's all I
I will sort of link Spandana's socials or LinkedIn. I guess probably the most relevant for staying tuned to updates and things like that. And you guys can definitely check all of them out on there. Spandana, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to sort of speak to you and just like gauge your thoughts on everything startup and everything to do with being a CEO. I think it's not easy to do what you're doing so early on in your career, but you're crushing it, and we're so proud of you. Whether that's the One Young World community, Forbes community, all of that. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, guys. So Chai with Startup CEOs will be back next week with a new guest who again is not yet confirmed, but all shall be revealed in good time. But anyways, thank you guys for staying tuned. See you in the next one.